Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Tea Time, the podcast. And on today's episode, I am joined by Melissa and Nicole. They are some friends of mine that I wanted to join me for a panel style discussion on how mental health is shaping the way we navigate our careers, businesses, and the things we hope to accomplish. All right, I wanted to have Melissa on because I was chatting with Nicole at first and she mentioned how Melissa wanted to like take a step back a bit. And I found it really interesting how you said to Nicole that you're taking a step back. And I was curious to learn more about that train of thought, that mindset, and the motivation that's like driving that direction. I want to hear your thoughts on that. And I know, especially, as women of color, as Black women, we are feeling tired, we are feeling burnt out. And there's just like a lot of pressure to perform. So, especially as high achieving women, I really wanted to hear your perspective of where you're going with that. And then from Nicole, we burnt out with marketing. We're burnt out with social media. The algorithm is changing all the time. So I also wanted to have you join us for the conversation because as a mom, especially, I'm a mom as well. Um, I think we are really trying to define what works looks like for us moving forward, especially as we prioritize our mental health and our overall well-being. So thank you so much for joining me. I am really happy to have you all here.
Thanks for having us.
So before we dive into these questions, just tell the audience a little bit about who you are, a little bit of the background of who you are, what you do, etc., etc., and then we will dive into these questions.
Yeah,
Melissa,
sure.
you could go first.
I'll kick us off. Yeah, so, I can run down my resume, which I think is where the question is going. But I think this year has really showed me, or not even just this year, but just post pandemic, how multifaceted I am as a creative and a technologist. So, on the back end, or primarily, I've been working in technology for almost 15 years. Specifically in digital product. So I come to organizations and help their teams organize around, um, the products that they're trying to make and new services that they're trying to make for their customer. And a lot of that includes, helping teams storm, norm, and ultimately perform.
Yeah.
Um, and so that has been the bread and butter for the significant part of my career, just being in product operations. But in the last year, I've been a producer. So I've been focused on creating content for Black women around this idea of mental health and wellness. And coming into it, I think for me, it was because it was something that was top of mind for me. And the more I just, kept doing it and, worked with other Black women in this space, I realized that we are all burnt out, regardless of the industry that you're in, right? So I know you guys are like hyper focused in the marketing industry, but tech is obviously a huge component of all the things that we do in our careers. And so that's what brought me to this space. So now, like, my mission, and like you talked a little bit about me wanting to take a step back. And I think it's really more of just pivoting and not putting my entire self and identity around this idea of what I've done or accomplished in tech.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of the ethos that I'm running on at this point.
Okay. All right. Nicole, please share your background and like tie it into like where you are today and where you're heading as it relates to mental health and wellness.
I feel like I might even do it backwards. I'm going to start off that even as this morning, I was stressed. And I'm very stressed day in and day out. I am a mom of a
Mm.
2-year old. I run the business. I'm a wife, family member, just all the different roles of family. And so it's been interesting for me, honestly, to watch my life evolve from being, let's say, a single 20s, just going after my career, to now balancing motherhood, balancing business, balancing wifehood, if you want to call it that, just
Yeah.
everything, trying to do extracurricular activities, have me time, do things with my friends, do things with my family. So it's like the whole avenue. I feel like I'm watching my life. I love TV. Not that'll get into my background, but I feel like I'm watching one of those shows where you start like, this is where I am now, stressed out, crazy. This is where I started 15 years ago. Let me show you how I got here. And so with
Yeah.
that being the case, I actually used to work in entertainment marketing. When I graduated from college, that was my goal. That was where I wanted to focus my time on and be super successful in the entertainment space. I would work
Mhm.
for Showtime Networks. I worked for, I'm trying to think now, everything's going back to Food Network. I also worked for, interned at radio stations, Vibe Magazine, and I got a chance to work in all different areas of marketing because my goal was to see what I didn't enjoy doing, honestly, to figure out what I wanted to do. So that gave me a chance to work on sales, branding, partnerships, television side, music side. So by the time I got to one of my final jobs in corporate slash entertainment, which was Food Network, I knew I was burnt out there also in a different way because it was a lot. I was getting to work at 9 o'clock sometimes, 9:30, not leaving till 9, 10 o'clock. So I was experiencing a type of burnout in a different way where it was all about my career, similar to Melissa, but I didn't feel fulfilled. And I got to a point where I found myself in the ER with my mom, and my mom was not knowing what's happening. I'm doubled over. It was doubled over under my desk at a point at work, and I had to go to the ER. And they just said pretty much that it was stressful. They couldn't see anything, but they just felt like I was going through something very stressful, and I knew I would get anxiety on the train. So I
Oh my
ended up saying,
gosh.
yeah, it was a lot, but I didn't know what it was. I just knew that something was going on,
Was
and I had to
wrong. Yeah.
something was wrong. And with that also being the fact, also combining that with me knowing that I didn't necessarily want my boss's job when I was working at the Food Network, I'm thinking,
Mm-hmm.
well, what am I doing? I'm just at a point where this is not what I want to do. I'm being stressed out. So let me take a step back. I started consulting, and then that led to me starting my own business, Sunny Day Marketing, which I have to this day. And that was about 12, 13 years ago. So over the course of the last 12, 13 years, I've been building my business, working with different types of a lot of entrepreneurs, small business organizations, and that evolved into me working with nonprofits that served entrepreneurs because I was doing workshops with them. And then I also started working with other nonprofits in different spaces like community development space, economic development space. And now I'm at the point where I'm still working in these sweet spots of um, economic development, community development. I'm also looking at social enterprises as well because nonprofits have very small budgets at times, depending on especially if they're local. But with the mental health part, it has been an up and down journey for me because it has always been tough to some degree. Because entrepreneurship has its high times and it has its low times, and I've always described it as a roller coaster marathon. If that's what you're interested in, like if you're in it for the long run, that's the marathon part. But you have to know
Right.
have the times where you're on top of the world, like, yes, I'm meant to be an entrepreneur. I love this. And the other times where you're looking at, I need a job, I need to get some money.
That
And
part.
so it's the ups and the downs. And so I
That
feel
is too real.
I feel like my mental health has been on the roller coaster journey for the past 12 years. And I've enjoyed it, and sometimes I've hated it. But I got to this point right now where adding momhood into it, especially, I felt like I wasn't even myself
Oh,
anymore for the past 2 years. So I took a step back. I was still working, but I took a step back to focus more time on my daughter. And now I feel like I'm finally starting to remember who I was and mingling again and networking. So my journey has really just been interesting working with different companies, and I feel as though I've always been on go and on the hamster wheel for the past 12, 13 years, except for just different types of hamster wheels.
Yeah.
wow.
Same.
I know, I was like, oh, that's a lot, but I have a lot.
No, but you have like hit the nail on the head on like every of all the lot points, you know? It's just too accurate. I felt it, So as a mother of a young toddler, like how do you balance it all right now? Because I feel like that's a question we ask each other all the time. How do you balance? Like how are you managing?
I don't think I'm balancing, but I think I am doing what I have to do. I always
Hmm.
tell my friends it feels like Groundhog Day every day, but there's still a little bit of difference and blessings in each day. And luckily for me, my husband and I are both able, like, we're both entrepreneurs as well. So he has the type of jobs where he does in terms of photography and event planning, where he may have certain jobs one day. I tend to create my schedule around, like, hey, tell me what jobs you have coming up or what obligations. And then what I'll do is I'll look for like next month. Kind of annoys him at times because I'm more of the planner where he's more like free form. But I'll say, let me know for the next month what you're looking at. And then I'll reach out to anyone I need to do meetings with and, clients and plan it, because the problem is my daughter's also in school part-time. So I know there's
Right.
set days that I can't even plan meetings on, even if technically he says he can take care of it. Sometimes jobs pop up for him and then he no longer can watch her, and I'm the one that kind of falls on me to watch her. So I tend to try to keep those days clear. So for me, it's not really a balance. It's just kind of looking at the trends, seeing how things fall out, and just saying, how can I prep for that? How can I prepare for that? And I try to make all my meetings for the most part on one day or 2 days,
Yeah.
and then have work days. And then when she's home, I'll have blocks set off in terms of, I may only squeeze a very important meeting in this day that maybe might be an hour that I know I could put Sesame Street on or some type of show. But if it's
Yeah.
more than that, I'm telling someone I really can't meet. And then the I get not that much sleep. And the evenings for me are about catch up. So I haven't learned the balance yet, but I have seen the one thing I think I'm blessed to been able to be experience or hear
Flexible.
from. Not really flexible, but hear experiences from are other mothers and parents who say your kids grow up in stages, and those stages are going to be how your business and your life goes. And a lot of them have said they went back to work after, when their kids were really young, when they started school for stability, but then they started getting more time. So now I no longer look at my life as trying to get that work life balance, but more, this is a stage that I'm in right now, more her time than me time. But in about a year or two, when she's in school full time and she's doing what she needs to do, it'll be more me time. So it's more just about kind of moving around for each
Mhm.
situation.
That is such good advice because that's the same thing I've found myself sharing with other moms is that every stage that they are at, your business has to pivot and evolve to go with it. And that's what I have done because I've seen how this podcast derived from doing Facebook Lives every Tuesday. And because my kids were really young, it was easier for me to. And then I had like a driver that would drop them off. So it was a different phase of my life as well. So I would take a nap at 1 p.m. They get home by 4. It was all their time from 4 to 8, get them to sleep. So they need to be like this by 8 o'clock because tea time Tuesdays was at 9 p.m. every single Tuesday. And that worked for me. But then when things shifted and I, started to drive, evening pickup drains me. I'm tired. I couldn't get my evening nap anymore. So tea time Tuesdays had to stop being alive. And then it shifted to being a podcast. And it has been a podcast since. So I love everything that you mentioned there because you actually bring up other really good points in terms of, planning, scheduling, um, having boundaries was a big one that I heard there. Like, I really can't take a call at these times. And that's because you are able to have boundaries and implement them with grace, and be able to communicate that. Because if you didn't have those boundaries, you would be actually more stressed out, feeling like, for those who are people pleasers, they'll be like, oh my gosh, I have to make this call. I'm frustrated. I can't get on the call because you're trying to make something work that isn't working,
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then from the, I guess, childless delegation.
Yeah. I was now
um,
coming to ask you, like, how do you focus on rest and mental wellness? And, how has it impacted your personal and professional life?
yeah, so a lot of me and my like really close girlfriends, we talk about this idea a lot of wanting to start families, but feeling um
It's not the right time.
inhibited, right? Because you're just thinking, okay, if right now I'm feeling like this, what in the world would it look like if
Oh,
I introduce another human being who has needs, right? Where it's not like another adult where it's like, okay, you can manage your own emotions, you can manage your own sleeping and eating schedule, right? Also specifically for Black women, I know a lot of us are uncoupled. I mean, I have the benefit of having an amazing partner, um, who is my project manager at times, right? Like when it comes to just making
nice.
sure that,
That's
hey,
very helpful.
did you eat today? Right? Like I will get a morning text to say, hey, just making sure you ate today, because little things like that, my stress and anxiety, um, at one point I was having like physical symptoms, right? So I haven't been diagnosed with anything, but I would wake up in the morning and be nauseous and just couldn't eat just because my anxiety was so bad. And so, you know, I think it impacts a lot of Black women who want to so badly like have the family and have that American dream, but it just feels slightly, we want to do it responsibly too, right?
Yeah,
Especially as you grow older, you're like, okay, I didn't wait this long to just now kind of go at it willy nilly. But I do think too, there's an expectation on women who don't have children to just do and receive things as if, we also don't have our own lives to kind of manage. And, there's some women who have no desire to have children. Um,
yeah,
and just because they don't necessarily have that family structure doesn't necessarily mean that they don't, one,
have,
suffer, right, from their own
yeah,
mental health and anxiety, from their careers and other external forces. But, there's also this idea of, do I need to have that family to be a full human being, particularly as a Black woman, particularly as a woman, right?
hmm,
And so for me, it's about a lot of communication, one with my partner about, okay, here's what we can do together, so that we can work towards building some consistency around our lifestyle. So if we do introduce a child into the mix, it's not kind of throwing us left field.
yeah. That's some really good points. But I also want to mention that as much as you plan, you're never ready.
And I hear that all the
It,
time.
it's going to throw you as prepared as you would be, and it's good. Like it's everything you're saying is like really good. You want to make sure, like, okay, I love the point of like we've waited this long, so you don't want to do it willy nilly. But there's gonna come a point where it's like the most we can do is come prepared and also leave space to know that it's also gonna throw me off.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Because every day it's like Tough Mudder meets Frogger, right? It's like jumping over this hoop. I read something on social media that said, if you really want to have a faith journey, become an entrepreneur.
Oh my
And that's how you get closer to God. And I was like, I see that. I can see that. So
It's true.
yeah, and even I remember a couple of years ago there was this whole theme of entrepreneurship, right? Was this idea of within the kind of confines or the scope of your career or the company you work with, like how you can kind of branch out and create your own thing. And some of us are still in that space of like the entrepreneurship, right? So they're
Mhm.
moms,
Yeah.
maybe not, who are still trying to climb the ladder or are just kind of sticking with the corporate structure. And unfortunately, I just feel like with the last few years, especially, corporations don't care. I went
Facts.
from before the pandemic where at least people felt bad, I guess, for firing you or for terminations. And now it's just, you're a number. And so a lot of what I've learned is, regardless of what happens, just making sure that I institute really good practices for myself, including making sure I drink plenty of water, making sure I get a good night's sleep, making sure that I take time to get away from the computer, right? Especially for us ladies who work in the technology or a tech adjacent field, we're always stuck to our computers, and if we're not on our
Oh my
computers,
gosh.
we're on our phones, and
Yeah.
there's never a moment when you're not connected, and that's not really healthy. And so
No.
bringing inviting that space to disconnect has been really important and something that I've been trying to prioritize. But I mean, I'm having this conversation with you guys knowing full and well that it doesn't look like that all the time. You know, like me personally, yesterday was a hard day. I just was like, I can't, it's like cut the show. Cut the show. Um, and I got uh drunk a bunch of water and I went to sleep so I could be fresh today. And I literally feel it in my spirit of like, okay, I'm better today. And now I can kind of have this conversation with you guys. So it's ever changing. I don't believe balance exists per se. I think it's just um seasons, right? So this may be your family season. This may be your career
Absolutely.
or business building season. Maybe this is, your health and wellness season where you're trying to like get off those last 10, 15 pounds. So when I start to even look at the months and saying, okay, here, summer is here. What is this going to be the season for? And right now, I'm definitely in the season of my selfish season of just saying like, I can't take your call. I can't solve your problem. I can't solve my problem. Right. And so this is my season.
I like the way
Oh,
you said
I
that too.
love this.
That's a great thing. And that's a great thing to be able to feel confident enough to say. Because a lot of people don't. Like they feel that way, but they don't want to say it. They're afraid of losing the contract. They're afraid of losing the opportunity. They're afraid of just what will people think. And to be able to say this is my season is important. Something else you said that made me think about it. I feel like I'm in an interesting place where I'm in my 40s and I have a lot of friends that are single and unmarried,
Mhm.
um, and they're thinking about the kids part. And I look at it from the perspective of I know how much work it is, but I also have been, you and me have been running together for 20 plus years. We've also worked hard. So we know what each other wants in terms of friendship, sisterhood. And I just look at them and say, make a decision because time is not running out. And I never say to do it based on your biological clock, but I say do what you think that you want your life to look like. Because especially I'm here in New York, living in New York, it is a stressful place to live. It's very expensive, like hustle is almost like everybody's hustle. Before I felt that was the thing that was popular. Like I'm on my hustle. Now people are like, no, it's not really so much fun, but you're required to be on your hustle living here. And when you said like the seasons part and what you need to be in, I'm even taking from that too. Like I had to walk. I had one of those days recently where I was just like, I don't know about the show. I'm like stretching myself because this day is not going the way I need it to go. But I took a walk and I just left. I told my husband, all right, you got bedtime. I'm just gonna go take a walk around the neighborhood. And I came back feeling so clear headed. And it's not selfish, but I always felt as though I wanted to be around to help put my daughter to bed, even though we kind of go back and forth and one person has the main responsibility. I wanted to be here to be on call. But that day I was like, I can't be on call. Like I need to mentally get out of that space. So I think that selfish part, it's not selfish. It's more just doing what your
Self-full.
body needs. Exactly. Self-full, doing what your body needs. And whether you're a mom or not, whether you're taking care of people or you're really just taking care of yourself, everybody needs that moment to be able to have time and reflect for themselves because if you break down, you can't do anything anyway, whether it's for somebody else or for yourself.
Taking care of yourself always gets like a bad rap. Like once you start prioritizing yourself, I don't know why it gets the word selfish attached to it, but you literally can't pour from an empty cup.
No.
I mean, I know we hear these cliche analogies, but the cliches are always, I find, very very true. That's why they're cliches, that's why they exist. It's like, the cliche of when you are taking off in an airplane, they tell you that if an emergency happens, you put your mask on first. You can't help anybody if you pass out. Right? So that's the
Yeah.
same thing with self-care. Like that's how I see it. If I pass out, I can't help anybody else, and the work will go on. To Melissa's point, if you drop down and you die today, your job is going to be listed before the afternoon is up. Like, oh shucks, she collapsed. I need somebody else to write these reports. Like,
Yeah.
And I think too, our culture really supports, or maybe support's not the right word, but ultimately what I'm trying to say is Black women do too much. Like, we do way too much, right? And we have a culture that supports us doing more than we need to.
Need to do.
So whereas, our white counterparts of the opposite gender may come up and say, like, they don't have this concept of like necessarily coming home and like being the primary caregiver. And some of them do, right? And I don't want to isolate people who are men who are like really about the family life, but ultimately it's the woman's responsibility, right? And then, I know for me, during the pandemic, while I didn't have children, I was taking care of my grandmother, who passed in 2022. And so, up until then, it was just always making sure I was down there with her, making sure that things were getting taken care of. And then when she passed, it was like, I didn't realize how much grief had consumed my life in 2023, on top of job loss, on top of it, right? And in my mind, I'm beating myself up because it's like, where's your podcast? And where's this? And like, where are all the things that you're supposed to be like this bad, what was it? The boss girl era, right? And I'm just
Oh
like,
yeah.
kind of just want to sit here and cry
Yeah.
and just do
Yeah.
that.
We went from the boss girl era or the girl boss era
Right.
to soft life and
I
and I
don't know,
think
to be honest. I feel that. Like, I don't know what soft life is.
But for me, soft life has really just been about stillness, right? Like when women are saying we want a softer life, we just want moments to be still. Like, I personally don't believe that we were put on this earth to work as hard as we do. And it is only until you get really good rest, or, since the pandemic, I've been able to engage in naps a lot more. What was a nap before 2020? Like, no one was doing that under the age of 5, right? It was
I mean
like,
I was.
and so you're ahead of the curve. You're ahead of the curve. And I just think, particularly for Black women, it's just like, not only does society require so much, and the expectation is that we do, and then in our family structures, the expectation is that we're the doer. Shout out to all the women who may be the oldest daughter. It's not fun, right? Because you're now taking care of your responsibilities, but then thinking about everyone's responsibilities. And, this morning I had a conversation with my mom, and she was going off on something, and I was like, I can't have this conversation with you, right? Like, so that was me actively listening to myself and saying, like, I have way too much to do. I know I had this conversation. I want it to be mentally clear. That was about, and that's my mom. But at the same time, it's okay. Like, I can call you tonight, or I can call you tomorrow, and no
Yeah.
one dies.
Yeah. You make some good points. It's just assumed. It's assumed as women that we are gonna take care of everything. Like, we're the caretakers, whether you're a mom or not, we get the caretaker role, you know? To your point of taking care of your grandmother, if the elderly get sick, we don't look to the boys, we look to
You
the
can't.
next woman.
And unfortunately, you can't. And we can go to a whole discussion about our male counterparts. It's just kind of like, hi, like, can we just establish like a baseline of what you're supposed to do, right? And I'm gonna step back because I don't enjoy the gender war conversations, but sometimes I'm like, there's some validity behind some of the stuff that
Of course. Yeah, like
behind that. I have this conversation with my husband a lot, actually, and he is a great father and great husband. But I always tell him, I say, sometimes I just feel as though there are things that men and women, using those two terms now, the conversation, naturally do or naturally appear to do. But I'm not so sure if it's nature or it's nurture. Like, to me, yes, maybe women are used to being the ones handling all the tasks in the house, let's say, in terms of the appointments and setting up stuff and scheduling. We had a conversation, was like, you're good at that. And I'm like, I'm good, but it's not necessarily means I want to do it. I'm just used to maybe being organized, and I just want it to be done. I don't want it on my plate anymore. And so sometimes I feel when kids are raised, they're raised seeing certain things, and that becomes a default of this is what is done, right? So now it's not, this is just what guys do versus what girls do. Sometimes that's what you see and you take on. And I had the opportunity to see it in reverse. So my father, my sister and I have different mothers, and so my mom, I don't want to call them single parents because all of our parents were in our life. But I primarily stayed with my mother. And then for my sister, she primarily was raised by her father. I mean, our father. So I got to see him in the quote single parent role. And I got to see my mom in the single parent role, even though we're seeing all together. And I saw my father cooking. I saw my father handling administrative work, doing her hair, you know, helping her get outfits together. So when someone would come to me and say, no, that's not what men do, I would say, well, now
Hmm.
maybe that's not what they do, but that doesn't mean that's not what they're not capable of doing it, because I very much have seen the capabilities of someone going into that role, which means you can. And I think that stress does add to them, because I have spoken to a lot of women. It seems I have to do all this administrative things. I'm going to speak it from the mother perspective, just because that's been my life recently, where I've had this conversation. I'm handling the doctor's appointments, and if I don't do the laundry and I'm not doing this, and it's not going to get done, I'm saying we're all having this conversation, but wait, what if we stopped? Would it not get done? Probably
Hmm.
wouldn't get done for a while, and certain things might get washed. But I think a level would hit for certain men, at least. That would be a level of frustration of, no, I'm not trying to do it anymore. And there's a lot of guys that will just go and be proactive about it anyway. But to your point, Melissa, I understand about the gender part, but I do think that because there's certain things that we just see happening as natural, we take it on as a next generation until you get to a point and say, actually, I don't want my life to look like that. And I'm looking at from my daughter and saying, I don't want my daughter's life to look like that, and her to expect that's what's going to happen. Her father and I are going to both give her different philosophies on how it should look like, because we're different people in that sense. But I know my role as her mother and someone, that giving life to you and want to make sure you're doing good, to show you that there are options. And when you choose who's going to be in your life, because that's going to play a part into your mental health too, who is the person that's by your side, supporting you, going with you, you need to choose someone that's right for you. So if you're all about that, I'm okay doing the administrative and I want to, that's fine. But make sure you're okay with that and that's the type of life you want to live. Don't let it be put on you by someone else, because that's their experience coming up. And you have to find something that meets in the middle, or maybe not right for each other. But that mental health part plays across it kind of plays across the field, I feel like, because we just we do things because we're used to it and we're brought up in certain environments. And so I think sometimes we look at our parents or whoever has raised us as that's the norm, and sometimes maybe that's
Yeah.
what's right. And then you sit back and think, oh, you have that experience, and wait, my mom or that person is not Superwoman. They're not Superman. They're a regular person, and these things they've been telling me, huh, that's not exactly right, but you now have all that stuff inside you that you're doing with other people, and people are looking at you, or you're not making it to where you want to make to in life, because you're following these patterns that have been set for you. So I know, I wanted to bring that up because I just feel like as I watch people and I experience myself, the things that I do, and I'm in therapy and I've had to kind of unpack a lot of these things. And it's just like, because it's what I've been taught. And these are things that have brought me anxiety. They brought me, that I'm always feeling kind of anxious. And my therapist said, you suffer from that, and let's dig deep. And I found out a lot of things that were tied to how I grew up, why I always feel the need to do X, Y, Z. And now I have to unlearn all those things.
I'm so glad you said that, because one of the themes we talked about for the conference that I hosted in April was this idea of how it's ancestrally passed down, this anxiety and the stress, and where our grandmothers and our mothers didn't have the space to say, I'm tired. Like I watched literally my grandmother work until she could not move. She passed away from a really nasty disease called ALS, which
Oh,
prevents the body from essentially your muscles deteriorate. Some people might know of it as Lou Gehrig's disease, and the ice bucket challenge was about ALS.
right.
And while they don't necessarily know what it comes from, there's a part of me that is like, what if there's a part of me that knows like the exertion, right? Like she took care of my grandfather, her husband, until he died, and he was paraplegic, and so there was so much that was happening. And then when he finally passed away, she was like, okay, well, I'm just going to take some trips and rest. And she died 2 years later because of this nasty disease. And the reason why I tell that story is one, so I don't forget it, but also two, especially as Black women, we have literally for generations over generations been told or expected to work. Right? It was illegal for us not to work, right? So whereas we had um, this idea of femininity, which was usually centered around white women, it never included us. It had no, like, there was no world in which, particularly here in the United States, where Black women were supposed to be at rest or be at ease. And so when we have these conversations about joy and like rest is resistance, it's a book by a woman named Trisha Hersey, who I interviewed in April, and it was an amazing experience. And what I like about her lens is like, as Black women, we almost forget that we are human, right? And the world almost forgets that we're a human and that rest is a birthright, right? Like it is not, you've put in X amount of hours for the week, you can rest. The opposite is true. You exist, right? And you are entitled to rest. And I love how some of the younger generation, like, Gen Z, kudos to them, because I see a lot of them saying like, I'm taking a siesta. I'm not dealing with this.
Gen Z
And
is so inspiring as a whole.
as a whole, right? Because, but I also think that that's each generation getting better, right? So as a technologist, I always think of like versions, right? So version 1.0, if your grandparents were working themselves to the bone, then like you would think 2, 3, 4 generations out,
Yeah.
we should ideally kind of have that ancestral knowledge and ancestral understanding that we were put in these situations, but we do not have to continue them, and we can manifest our own different realities. So Nicole, when you talk about, your daughter, I mean, Lord knows what the world is going to look like by the time she's our age. But hopefully my prayer would be that she could decide who she wants to be with, live where she wants, have a cost of living that doesn't like stretch her to the bone. And if she decides she wants to work overtime because she loves it, do you? But if she decides she wants to be a stay-at-home mom, like I think we've bastardized this idea that women should stay home or like that's a bad thing. It's not. It is work. Anyone who has worked in a home, anyone who has a home knows that maintaining a home is work. So I do want to just make sure that we recognize that a lot of this has been put on us. And just because it is put on us, it does not mean, just because they throw it at you, don't mean you have to catch it.
Yeah. Wow, that's so good. Like I wasn't expecting us to go there from the gender perspective, but you all are not wrong in the least. I actually think you're absolutely right because it just ends up with women feeling so burnt out, so stressed, just even from the mental toll of it all, because it's just expected of us to always have to be on, show up, manage the household, take care of the appointments, and the men can do it too, but this assumed role for us, it's tired. And I think the word that you all were probably searching for is the socialization of young boys. We always give it to the girls to be organized and it's expected, and the boys will be boys. They're going to be rough and dirty and disorganized, and that's accepted. And if they throw the dirty clothes right next to the hamper, oh boys, you can't do anything bad.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they can if it was trained the same way we can get our girls to be organized as well from young.
And I want to add to that because I think I can only speak from a woman's perspective. My husband and I have these gender conversations all day long. I was actually thinking he might have been that fourth screen saying some other stuff, like I guess what we're saying. But I will say I can appreciate his perspective and letting me know the male side of it. And they have their own responsibilities and their own things that are put on in front on put on them in terms of always being the caretaker and the provider of the company of the family. They have to make sure that they can't be weak, they can't show emotions. And I just think that from both sides, it's such an injustice done in the sense of putting these type of roles on people. I think there are going to be certain things we want as people, maybe naturally, even from cave,
Yeah.
couple days. that there are going to be certain things that maybe people are attracted to and want, but I think it's good to be able to at least show it all. And especially for men, especially for Black men too, this is a hard world to live in, America at least, for Black men. And I remember there was one comment my dad made to me when I was in my teenagers, and it always stood out to me, because we were getting into it. I was in my teenage years, and he's just like, you don't respect me as your father, you don't respect me as a Black man. And that just hit me. And we never really got a chance to unpack it, but it's always stayed in my head, because I never thought of him as, per se, at least in my teenage years, as a Black man. I just thought of him as daddy and my father and a man. But the fact that he had to throw in that extra adjective too. And my father had a lot of issues over time that, if I could look back now and think about it from the mental health space, he was going through a lot. A lot of pressure being put on him, especially being a single parent of sorts in a sense too. So I think, when it does come to this mental health, I think kids just need to be taught from a young age that there's a lot that's going on. There are things that you can do no matter what your gender is, depending on what you find to be exciting, interesting. And then you also have to be able to put up boundaries and say no, and don't think just because you're a certain type of way, you have to present that way, you must be that way. And it's also teaching other people to be more mindful of that, so it doesn't become something that's like, oh, what are you
Right.
about? Oh no, we can't rock with you because you don't do it like everyone else. There's this culture that we all have of kind of follow the leader or follow everybody else. And
Yeah.
even within that mental space, you have people, I want to say almost, dying is a strong word, but I feel like people just feel as though they are not being themselves, and they're trapped in a body and the life that they don't want to be in because of everything that's surrounding them is what they feel they have to be. And then that starts to play on your mental too, because now you're doing this internal struggle of, I don't really want to do that. I don't think that way. But in order to be accepted, I must. So it's like all these things happening. And then if you don't have the resources like therapy, someone to talk to, even know what to read to help you get out of that place, you end up keeping it internal. And unfortunately, your grandmother probably holding on to all these things, so you get to a point where it becomes too late for you to even enjoy your life, because now your body is taking a hit on the mental and the physical level.
Yeah, and I would argue that it does slowly kill us. I mean, I think we always think of death as like a quick and dirty process, but
Mm.
there's a slow um mental, spiritual, and physical death that happens, right? So, mentally we get burnt out. Physically we inherit a lot of these autoimmune diseases. So you see things like lupus is predominantly found in women of color or Black women. And when you really like dig into like what lupus and even cancer, like what those things are, it is the body fighting itself. And
Mm-hmm.
so another book that I really enjoy reading because I'm a bookworm, it's called I have it here actually. It's called The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh.
Like I keep it here to kind of remind me that the things that I am experiencing or the things that are manifesting in my body aren't just like, hey, where did this pain in my back come from? Right? It's not like a random thing, especially because there was no impact. Like I didn't fall, right? But like, I remember there would be times where I couldn't walk down the steps properly because my bones and my body were so stiff. And so I decided to like incorporate um massages once a month. I go to Hand and Stone and I just let them do the work because again, it's not a treat to take care of yourself.
It's
It
a
is
requirement.
responsibility. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
responsibility, right? Especially, when you're not a child anymore, right? So when you turn 18, like it's almost like we should have a rite of passage to say like, here's how you take care of yourself as an adult. And we never got that.
Yeah, we didn't.
We never got okay, right? And this is no fault to like our mothers or our grandmothers because they're fighting a fight that we'll know nothing about because we grew up in a world where we could have these conversations. They weren't having these conversations, at least in public, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to look at that. Mm-hmm.
And that matters, right? Whereas I see like baby boomers and that generation, like therapy, like my dad calls it a head shrinker to this day. I'm like,
Then
I'm
those
like, okay.
time.
I
Yes.
chalk it up to the fact that he's an older man, but I'm just like, well, actually, head shrinkers should have probably been more available to your generation, I think, but I digress. And so I think as much as we are kind of in the thick of it, I do want to celebrate the fact that we've made a lot of strides, especially since 2015. Because like I remember 2015, 2016 is when we really
It was
started.
hustle cause it was about hustle culture. Everything was grind this.
Yeah.
Social
And
media was just everything was about the word grind and hustle. Sleep
True.
when I mean what? Sleep
When
when
I'm
you
dead. When I'm
yeah,
dead.
sleep when I'm dead. Like all of these things, it's almost like, it was this like rite of passage of sorts where it's like, oh, a badge of honor. That's what I mean. A badge of honor to be like, yeah, hustle when I'm dead. I mean, sleep when I'm dead.
yeah, I remember the whole like the Gary Vaynerchuk era of like, always being a go. And, it's not lost on me while we might have adopted that language, it wasn't necessarily our narrative. And that's something that's key. Like I always try to, if I talk to younger women or just anyone in general, because I don't think age necessarily dictates where you are in your life's journey per se. But like I always tell people like, who said that? Because
It's
I always have
true.
to tell myself,
Question it. Where did it come from?
where did it come from? Did you get it from an Instagram post? Because a lot of us are using Instagram as therapy. And let's just be real, right? Like a lot of us are going online and be like, yep, my therapist said you're a narcissist. And now everyone's a narcissist. Right? Or like the thing that's coming up for me is like everyone's autistic now. And I'm like, okay, like let's take a breath. Right. And I think what it's really saying is that no one thinks the same way, like I'm a very visual person. I need to see things with my eyes. Some people need to hear it, right? Some people need to talk it out. So even when I'm doing trainings or if I'm working with people, I'm always just mindful of like, how are you receiving this information? But with that being said, I just don't accept just because it's popular doesn't mean it's right for you.
Ooh, that is a word. That is a good one. I need to mark that. That's going on a quote.
Another
Yeah, because
Instagram. But this
another
one
Instagram
is
quote,
the one
right?
they should be following.
And I mean, I can go into my bag when it comes to stuff like that. Like, just the three of us here come from very different backgrounds, very different cultures. So it would be illogical for us to think that the three of us process things the same way just because we're all women or just because we're all Black women, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just think we do ourselves a disservice by not honoring ourselves by being still and saying in time, like, what is it that you need? Like this morning when I was a little anxious, like when my mom called, I was like, what do you need, Melissa? Right. And I take a sip of water just because I've been trained now to just try to do that. I don't know. In my mind, I'm like, the water will fix it. The water will fix it. I just give me
I
something.
love that.
The
But
reset.
in all seriousness, it's like, especially because if we're thinking about mental health and the fact that we are on platforms like TikTok and Instagram very often, we are getting programmed. We are being told consistently and aggressively too what we're not capable of, why there's so much dissension between Black men and Black women, as if men and women haven't always, if you remember, there was a book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I mean, it's been a ongoing theme that we're different as a gender, but somehow or another it's like, Black women are too aggressive and we're too this. And it's like, no, we're just trying to take care of business. We're just trying to make sure our families are okay. A lot of us start these entrepreneurial journeys because we want to make sure not only that our kids are okay, but for those who don't have kids, like I'm always thinking of, I have to take care of my parents. I have to, at the time, take care of my grandmother. So give yourself some effing grace is what I like to say.
I
I think that's hard.
love that.
I get it, but it's important.
Most definitely. This is so, so good. This is a good conversation. And I feel like we breezed through a lot of my questions effortlessly. Like one of them is like, what do you do to incorporate self care into your day? And it's the water, it's having boundaries, it's you've mentioned it in the oil and the massage, like you have your non-negotiables.
And I
Yeah.
want to add to that too, because I was just thinking about this. Faith is a big part of self care for me. Because there are moments where I'm looking at my life, I'm looking at my house, I'm looking at my bank account, and I'm thinking, I don't know what to do. But I pray, I get still, or I try to get as still as I can for 30 seconds and just be like, I have this thing now. God, I've given it to you. God, take the wheel. And I literally envision myself just saying, God, here, thank you so much for just being willing to take it because I can't anymore. And I noticed that things end up working out, and they've been working out over the course of my life. Now, is it the where I want it to be? No, because I feel like I've been surviving longer than I've been thriving. And I'm back in survival mode, trying to get to thriving again. But I do at least appreciate the ability to survive. And that to me comes through my grace, not my grace, my faith in God that He's always going to provide for me and provide for my family and show me the way and have me sit back and say, all right, what is it that you want me to do today, or what can I just give over to you? Because I've tried the different self-care with, I hear people going to like get their nails done and massages, and honestly I'm sure that I would enjoy doing that, but I just feel like sometimes I just get the best self-care by having a quiet house. Like my husband takes my daughter out. I can sit in silence because this house is rarely ever silent. And I just sit. I listen to the traffic go by. I hear the birds in the trees. I pray to God, at times. Or I just sit and stare at my screen and I'll do work. And I think that self care is different for people in different ways. Like, I actually enjoy working. So some people might say self care is me removing myself from work. No, if I can get a project done and sit here and quiet, turn on Spotify, to me, that's self care because it also reminds me of the times when I didn't have as much responsibility on my plate and I feel accomplished and I feel productive. So my self care is kind of more centered around what do I need in that moment? Do I need silence? Do I need to accomplish something? Do I need to relax? Do I need to be on the beach? And if I could just get those moments, it's good for me. But the most important, I will have to say, is always my faith in God, because there are times where I really don't know what's going to happen. But I turn around and I say, you know what? 6 months later, I'm here. When my dad passed away, I felt like life had ended. I felt like literally my heart broke. Like I was like, this is what it feels like. And I didn't think I was ever going to get over that. But now here we are, 6, 8 years later. It's just like, okay,
Hmm.
God, you got me. You comforted me. You made sure I got through that. So I didn't stay in a space where I couldn't be productive to other people. And no, I'm never going to be that same person again. But I do know that I'm able to keep moving on. And because of that, I feel like I took care of myself in the moment the way I needed to. And He led me to places like therapy. He led me to being in my friends and my family's spaces. He led me to working on projects that took my mind off of it. So self-care for me has really been also very faith-centered as well.
I love that, Nicole,
No,
because
so good.
I just feel like, yeah, that's kind of what that's the stillness part and
Hmm.
like the listening part. And I can relate to what you say about feeling like you've changed and you not only mourn the person, but you mourn who you have to become now that you don't have this person there. Whereas, you could call your dad and just vent or whatever it was. Now you can't do that. But you
You
still have
actually call and you're like, oh, it doesn't work. Number doesn't work.
but you still got to pay your bills and you still got to show up and you still got
Mm.
to get out of bed and like take a shower and like those things become hard. And even like I have this chat with some of my girlfriends, and like when we are having bad days, they're just like, okay, just lay there. Like if there's a day where you just feel like I can't, then don't,
Yeah.
because that is
Well,
actually where the stillness comes in, so you can hear from God and you can just let Him download. And I know there are a lot of people who aren't necessarily spiritual. This has nothing to do with being Christian or Muslim or anything else. I just feel like as a divine human being, because religion out the door, like your spiritual connection is always there. I don't care what anyone says.
yeah.
um and sometimes, like I said last year, I was like, God, just please get me to December, and it's June. You see how that works? And there are
Yeah.
things that pop up, and I'm so grateful for the both of you. Um, you know, Cassia, I met Cassia at a Starbucks randomly because I like to talk to people. And then
And
Nicole,
I'm still so grateful because I probably wouldn't have said hi.
right? And she was talking some stuff. I was like, "Oh, she sounds smart," you know. And so, but those are like the times when God is actually really working, right? Because now that was definitely for the pandemic. I want to say it
It
was
was
like,
before the pandemic. I think it was 2019.
okay, yeah, it probably
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
And you
Summer
know,
2019.
Nicole and I worked together and like reconnected. And I do think that God will do what we consider as small things, but they're huge because who knows how this conversation is going to impact your listeners and people who may follow Nicole or people who may follow me.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you just have to realize that you're doing the work just by being yourself. But always just listening to him. And it is like I said, it's a faith journey, being an entrepreneur, just being in life in general. And I tell Jesus, like, take the wheel, take the car payment, take the mortgage note, take all of it,
You know
and
what?
see
Oh,
what he does. No, just see what he
Ye-
does.
I just want to add to just something really quickly when you said that. I heard from someone, I wish I can give them credit, but I really don't remember who said this. I was watching on TV. They basically said they didn't want to leave this earth without giving and putting out everything that God put in their spirit and every skill and talent they gave with leaving this earth with it. They're like, I don't want to take anything with me when I die. And so, to your point, whether your spirituality, whatever you believe in, who you feel gave it to you, I just thought that that was such an interesting thing to say, that if you have all these things bubbling up in you and you take it with you when you die, you almost die wishing I wish I could have, or I wonder what would have happened. And that is really ties you back into like your mental being too, because now you have these dreams that were never fulfilled, or it's dream deferred. So I just wanted to put that out there as we're talking about this, because I think that plays a part into, I'm now trying to live life of anything I feel in me that I was meant to do, whether it's successful or not. I want to get it out of me before I leave this earth, because who knows who it's going to impact? Who knows how I'll feel? Who knows how it will change my life or the life of my families to come?
Amen.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and I do want to say for anyone who might be struggling with mental health that sometimes you can't talk it away, you can't massage it away, you can't walk it away. You do need that support. And I think as Black
Mm-hmm.
women, we convince ourselves that we can do it by ourselves, right? And I'll say me, so because I know y'all aren't that, right? But when I had a situation where I literally could not get out of bed, and I'm like crying and I'm calling one of my sorority sisters, and I was telling her the situation because she also kind of struggles with the same thing or had struggled with the same thing, and she referred me to a doctor. She went on ZocDoc and she was like, call Dr. So and so, let's make an appointment. And made an appointment, and boom, medication, right? Because there, and especially I definitely encourage you guys to like look into this book, but there are physiological things that are happening to us from the foods we eat, from the chemicals around us, from this unnatural world that we live in. Anyone who's traveled abroad knows that the quality of life and the lifestyles abroad,
Yep.
80.
I tell my sister this all the time. The food in America is kind of weird.
Oh,
Like
it's
there,
trash.
there was a time we were making minced beef. Oh, right. And I was like, that isn't right. Like that just isn't right. It was the smell is like the minced meat back in Trinidad just doesn't smell like that. Nothing was wrong with it. I could tell it was like still good. It wasn't rotten, but it was smelling off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's why I don't even do plant-based stuff. Like when you have like plant-based meat, because I'm like, but what is it? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
They sell, because you also, and you guys are in marketing, so you guys know this more than I do, right? We get sold these images of like what the seller ultimately wants to communicate, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the truth.
That
And
is
we can have that conversation. I'll let you guys be the experts there. But sometimes you are literally just trying to move product, right? Like you're moving product by selling, this lifestyle that people are trying to buy into with like plant-based. Well, if you want plant-based, just eat a vegetable, right?
Yes.
Right. Because I'm a meat eater, and like I kind of feel like I don't want to engage in it, not because it's meat, but because of like, where does it come from? Some of it's coming
Exactly.
from overseas, right? So I'm not trying to live this lifestyle where it's like, oh, I'm a plant-based. And then tomorrow they're going to say, what was it, like keto, which is like eat all the fatty meats that you can. And so again, that goes back to this idea of you really have to discern from your maker, like what is right for you, right? Because again,
Mm-hmm.
my body type is not your body type, right? I know that for me, I need to eat a lot of like fish and like those types of proteins, and I enjoy it. Some other people might not be into that, and it's okay. But like, don't buy everything people are trying to sell you. Is what I'm just trying to like lean into, because there's a lot of con artists out here too, you know. So
You have to really be educated. Don't just jump on this new fad because, again, social media is telling you how to think, how to eat. It really boils down to they say, you're looking at social media and you're feeding your mind, you're also feeding your spirit, and then you're also making your decisions on like what you're feeding your body literally based off of, this new diet, new this. And plant-based, still you don't even know what it's coming from. Sometimes they don't even list it. It's not very clear. It really is marketing. Like when you really do pay attention to what's on the label, it really is marketing.
Oh yeah. Okay, I remember there was instance with Burger King where they said they were coming out the Whopper Impossible. And people got so
yep,
excited, like, "Oh, finally, it's going to be healthier." And then someone starts, articles start coming out like, actually, if you want the healthier burger, getting the actual burger is healthier than getting the Whopper Impossible. And I think it was tied to cholesterol. But if you follow the marketing, to your point, then you're going to go and think, oh, because it's not meat and because eating meat is bad, or however people are positioning it, you would think that way. I mean, I can't be mad. I'm a marketer and I'm a sucker for marketing and I love it. So I love that, like, ooh, I'm going to buy that cereal because that cereal looks good and healthy. And then I look at the
yeah,
labels
I'm
and
I'm
it's
a I'm a sucker for great branding. Like I
yes.
just get drawn to like, oh, that looks nice. It looks pretty. It works. It works. They know
Yeah.
what to put out there. That's what we were trained to do.
Well, you know what?
Oh,
To your point, though, they probably do that with mental health too, and but that's a good type of marketing and branding that's happened recently, where they've destigmatized it to be like, you know what? It's not a bad thing to have a therapist. It actually helps you. It helps you to relax. Don't be ashamed to think about it. Like we could talk about it openly. 10 years ago, we probably would be having this conversation. So, in the sense of we talk about the marketing, it's actually I'm glad the strides they've made in this area because I can have conversations with my friends and ask openly, hey, do you know about therapists for that? You know about therapists for that? One of my friends recently told me she was just put on medication for anxiety, and I didn't blink an eye. 10 years ago, I've been like, you okay, girl? But now I get it. So, even bringing that into like kind of full circle is good.
yeah,
This mental health, I think, is in a good space right now
yeah.
where people are not feeling like it's the worst thing to do. Before, you might be have been the family outcast. If you need a therapist, you can talk, especially sometimes in the Caribbean community, like that's not things that you're going to bring up. But
Mm-mm. That's
now,
tough.
right, it is. It's like go to God, go to Jesus, handle your stuff inside. Don't talk to business outside. Our
You
business stays in the
pray
house.
it away.
Pray it away. Exactly.
so against that. I mean, not praying, but I'm so against this idea of like God and like not therapy.
Yes.
It's like it's even in the Bible, faith without works is dead. So it is saying, yes, start with the faith, because you have to actually, there's a belief that has to come in that you can be healed, you can be transformed. And so for
Mm-hmm.
anyone who's listening and who's Christian, I always go back to, and I don't remember the exact book because I'm not a super Christian, but this the story of the woman who was just like, um, you know, woman with the issue of blood, or I'm sorry, I'm losing the story. The one where it was like he was telling God, hey, I've been here and no one's helped me, and I have this mat here and I just want to be healed. And it was just like, pick up your mat and go.
Yep.
Yeah.
And,
Believe.
there has to be a radical confidence that you literally, sometimes you're going to have to cry and push through. But that is where God is like, okay, you literally have all the things, because if you believe you're made in his image, right? Or even if you don't believe you believe you're part of this bigger universe, we're like a blip in the universe, you should already understand that, the power is in you. Whatever is out there is in here. And so I'm always just reminding myself of like, okay, woman, pick up yourself and go. Give yourself a second to like cry. Give yourself a second to like decompress. But always know that you are one step away, or you are one moment away, or you're one job opportunity away from it just being different. And like, how many times, like Nicole, you were just talking about making it to, the end of the month or what have you. And it's like I got a random opportunity that paid very well very recently, that I was like, I didn't go searching for this. I didn't ask for this per se, but it was so perfect. And that is actually how I knew it was divine. I was like, oh, I see what you're out here doing. Right. And it's really this idea of like all things are working for our good. And if you just believe that, that's where the change comes in. But also, get a prescription if you need to. Like, I used to feel very like, oh, shouldn't talk to people about that. But now I'm just kind of like, if I don't say it, then there's going to be another girl who's in her 20s who doesn't know that the fact that she can't get out of bed and, got the degrees, got the thises and the that's. And then people are just like, but you're so successful. But it's like, yeah, but I'm actually hurting inside. Right. So, I'll scream to the top of my lungs. Like, some of us actually need more support than talk therapy.
All right. I was also wanted to say that I love that you said that, because my most recent post on Instagram was a quote that came out of a team session with a therapist. Because as you all know, or I don't think Nicole knows, but I'm also on the writer's block team. And we had a session with a therapist last week. And one of my biggest takeaways is you rob your friends of supporting you when you don't ask for help. And a lot of us really struggle with asking for help. We really feel like we have to do everything alone. Or even when we do come and we ask for help because we really need to ask, we just feel like we're a burden. I know I struggle with feeling like, oh, I'm a burden. I mean, I struggle as much to ask for the help, but I hate being in a position where I need to ask. It's like, oh, I just don't want to be in this position where I have to ask because I don't want to bother anybody.
Yeah, I think a lot of people go through that, and that's, I think, why there's also that quote that floats around: checking on your strongest friend, because sometimes you're the one that needs it the most because you think they have it covered, and then you talk to them, and if they do open up, you realize things are going crazy. Like, I remember, I wouldn't call it, I don't want to say actual depression, not depression, but I remember there was a stage in my life where I felt like I was going through a depressive moment. And one of my friends said, oh, yeah, I remember that. That's when you were acting like this. And I was like, funny enough, no, that is not what that was. I was a little down, but I wasn't. I said, when I was truly like that, crying in my house every night and, not picking up the phone or whatever the case I was doing, I was putting on one face outside because I still have bills to pay. I had things to do. I think I just started my business for a few years, and I don't remember when. But I was like, when I was really going through that stuff, I wasn't telling anybody because I was embarrassed. I'm sitting here crying on my couch every night, and I'm feeling down, and I just don't know what I'm going to do. So if they had checked in on me at that moment, I say my friends don't check in on me, but they didn't even know to ask because the way with things we were talking about, it's like, oh, she seems fine. And I
The way
think
you were presenting yourself, no one could tell that anything was wrong.
nothing, because I always laugh when I think about it. She's like, I remember that time. I was like, that definitely was not the time. And, had I been more open with it, it would have probably made it easier for me to get that help. And I've had to learn also to get to those points where I am opening up more. Because people used to tell me, and they might still today, that I'm a very kind of closed book. Like, I'm very private. I have a very tight and small circle that really knows what I'm going through. And that's just because I think maybe a Capricorn, whatever the case is, it's hard for me to get to. Oh, I'm a Capricorn. Like, people have to go through rings.
As I was thinking, I was like, well, I wonder what her sign is.
Capricorn. I just technology. Like, people have to get over see me in my castle, get over the big lake, the moat, climb over the castle, climb up, and then I might give you a little bit of something and be like, come back next week, and I'll give you more. But
Right.
I had to learn to stop doing that, because not only was it unhealthy for me, it also was impacting my friendships and my relationships, because now people that weren't so inclined to share back with me. And I was seeing the impact of that. And I said, you know what? Sometimes you do have to open up to people. And it does feel good to be able to talk to people and not feel like I'm hiding everything inside. Like, it felt healthier. It felt lighter. And
So
so
I have
now,
a question. Oh,
mhm.
let me let you finish.
I was
Me
gonna
off,
say that's
cut me
why.
off.
My question is, we always hear check on your strong friends.
Yeah.
But what happens when you check on your strong friends and they're presenting like, as you said, everything's fine? How do you help and support them? And even in those cases where you know something isn't right, but they still refuse to let you support them. That is the question of the hour. I don't know who's going to be able to answer that. I don't know if you may be able to give some insight.
I would say, there's going to be no perfect answer because I've done everything from I had an intervention with a friend once, which I might not necessarily recommend, but could be something that you could do.
Hmm.
And the reason why we did it as a collective of friends and like approached this one friend was because we really cared, right? And I don't know if the friend really received it that way. So I am also very mindful of,
Yeah.
don't push through people's stuff, right? Because
Yeah.
even God doesn't do that, right? Like he's a gentleman. You have to just be like, God, I need help. For him to be like, okay, now we can have a conversation. But what I will say is, if you see that it is getting to a point where they're just non-responsive, or it's like on the brink of self-harm, depending on your relationship with the friend, right? Like this is not a one size fits all. I think you do have to use that discernment. But sometimes like just sitting them down and just saying like, I'm a little concerned because I'm noticing these things. And like when you're able to point out specifics, like, hey, I noticed like you keep missing our phone dates, or, I haven't heard from you. You're not posting on social media. That's usually a bigger red flag. Like usually when I see people who are super active on social media and then they stop without saying like, hey guys, I'm taking a break, right? It's usually an indication of like there's a there. And
Hmm.
so I think, you know, broach the topic lightly, and sometimes I'll say like, hey, I might not be the person you want to talk to and I respect it, but is there anyone that you would like to be here for that, or is there somebody else who would be better for you? I'm not going to take any like qualms about it. Like I just want to make sure you're okay.
That
And
is a really good response. Yeah,
I,
Nicole?
I, no, I would say I would add, just keep checking in on them, because there's sometimes, if they're not going to let you through, they're just not going to let you through. But you sometimes will never realize just the little things that make
Hmm.
such a big difference to them, to just say, check on them. Because I had a friend like that recently that I checked on. I was like, I just want to make sure you're okay. And at the end of the conversation, they said, I really appreciate that. That you think about me. I'm like, yeah, I definitely think about you. I don't know if to always reach out, but I'm going to check in because I care about you. And I think sometimes just doing that is a way to get through. And if you really feel like your friends are perhaps spiraling, like Melissa said, that is when I do recommend starting to recommend more tangible things that they can do. Like, hey, maybe you should check out this therapist. I'm that friend that will straight send you the therapist as recommendations. Like, no, this is not me just talking about it. I'm sending you stuff. I'm
Mhm.
forwarding you articles. Not to be annoying, but in a way to just say, in case you don't want to talk about it, maybe it just kind of stays in the background about it. And I really do. And then, I pray. I've always prayed for my friend and just say, hey, God, please watch over them and do what they have to do, and do it, do what relieves all this pressure that's on them. But I just think it's the checking, and there's no way that you can make a person do what they're not ready to do. But if you do start to
Hmm.
see huge red flags, I think you just try to get them help when you can. I'm thinking about this now too, because I know there's a line, and I'm going to be
Yeah.
very frank here. Sometimes you have a lot on your plate too, and you want to help your friend, but by getting in deeper with them, you might get involved into a situation that pulls you down. So that comes into some situations where I'm very mindful of what kind of help can I offer. Because while I'm not selfish, I'm also very recognizing that this could be something very major. And while, you know, it isn't God's plan to help me to help my brothers and sisters, right now I don't know if I can handle this. So I try to do the little things that I can do, but I also will be there to support system, and I have to have my boundaries with that in terms of what you can do. So I
Yeah.
wanted to bring that part up too, because I think sometimes that guilt pops in too. If you have a friend that you know is going through something, and you're like, well, how far do I go to this? Did you have to set
Yeah.
levels for yourself too of how you get involved, and when you have to kind of just stop and say, okay, I've got to where I can get to right now at this point. I provided
Mhm.
resources or help or suggestions, and now maybe I have to help from afar in a different type of way. But I don't have to give up. But that doesn't
Yeah.
mean you just jump in and say, "Oh, I'm ride or die," because that may not benefit either of you, to be honest.
That's a very balanced answer. Like you also have to know how much you can take on your plate. You have to know your own limitations in terms of how much I can help and support. And as you said, you just have to be really light with it at some point too. Like, okay, I offered myself multiple times. I also recognize these are my limitations. So I'm just gonna take a step back, but check in lightly ever so often. So that's a really great response. So as we pivot to the rapid fire questions and wrapping up today's discussion, is there any last pieces of advice you would want to give to listeners who are struggling to balance, though we have not balance because we've already established balance doesn't exist, but to manage their mental health with all of their career ambitions? So, Melissa, from like a purely career standpoint, and then Nicole from a more business building standpoint.
Whew. Um, the thing that's coming up for me is if in your mind the narrative is I am alone or I can't do this or something around that in that space, just know that it's a lie. Um, you've got to understand that your perspective, particularly when you're emotionally overwhelmed, is not an accurate one. So you think about if you, let's just say, for lack of a better analogy, like run into the street and there's a car coming, right? Like you're not thinking about anything else but like running away or getting away from that car. Or if you're getting chased by a dog, right? And so to chase by a dog is probably a better analogy. And so you're running away from this dog or this animal and you might run into the street. That's not a good decision, right? You would have made that decision if you weren't under attack, right? Anxiety is an attack. Uh, you know, mental health disorders, if we want to call them that, are attacks, right? Just like you can get a cold or just like you can get the flu, which is what a virus attacking the body. It is the same concept with mental health. It's an attack. So if you're under attack, you're not going to make the best decisions. And I've made several not great decisions. I've literally moved from the Northeast to the Southeast because of really um, feeling overwhelmed and feeling that I did not have anyone who was going to help me. Did I ask anyone to help me? No. Right. But in that moment, I was making decisions off of how I felt. And for us, particularly us water signs, right? I'm a Pisces. So like sometimes we can make those really not
I'm
great
Cancer, a water sign as well.
you already understand, right? So just understand that everything you think isn't the truth. And that's, you should be grateful for that, right? Because you can sit here, how many times, I know I've applied for jobs and like, oh, I might not get it. And it's like, oh, wow, they called me back. Flip side, I applied for jobs. I'm like, I got that, didn't hear back, right? So everything you think isn't actually the truth. And we should actually be grateful for that because if you feel like, again, you're going to make a decision that's going to impact you for your entire life, or it's just going to impact you negatively, particularly as it relates to your career. But, I'm bigger than career, right? Like, I just want to make sure that folks are really thinking about their lives in totality. Know that it is a lie that no one's going to help you. Even if you call 988, right? Which is a number for anyone who is going through a mental health crisis, or if a loved one is going through a mental health crisis, you can dial 988. It's a nationwide number for those who are in the States. You can call them. And this is these are people who have they don't know your history. They're not going to go on social media and talk about you bad. They're not going to remember it and come back and be like, yeah, remember that time Cassia was about to flip a script, right? So there are resources there. And then, I would also, because I do recognize too that we live in a loneliness pandemic. So the Surgeon General has talked about this more recently. It's like his public thrust, if you will. And I would just encourage you to really try to build community, even as frivolous as it's like going to your local coffee shop and meeting people, right? And no, you're not necessarily going to tell them your life story, but sometimes just knowing that I had a really crappy day. Talking about it with somebody who just doesn't care from left or right, sometimes for me is cathartic versus talking to friends. Because friends they have the muscle memory, hey, like Nicole said, her friend was like, yeah, you were acting this way, and then it has this anxiety of okay, do I need to tell this friend this thing, right? I actually find that talking to strangers is helpful. But if you prefer to talk to someone just that, just understand that, yes, we're all going through stuff. As a friend, I am always mindful that, and I'll tell my friends, I can't help you in this way. Right? There have been times where I could not be available for people, but it's I still want to make sure you're okay. What can I do? Can I call someone on your behalf? I even reached out to a friend once who I was like, hey, let me call your mom or your sister to let them know in a way that they can understand, where you won't necessarily feel like you have the burden of bringing this to a family member. Right. So I would just, close it out by saying all your thoughts are not true. And that's actually a good thing, because anything that's telling you you're alone or nobody likes you or anything like that is a lie.
Yeah, that is so true. And it stems from anxiety, actually.
I need you to repeat it for me, because my 1 o'clock p.m. water alarm went off and I missed the second half of what you asked.
Oh, okay. Basically, to close out the episode, the question was, what is any last piece of advice you want to leave for our listeners who are in need of help to manage their mental health with their career ambitions?
Okay. I would just say, probably be honest with yourself. That's the first part of everything. I think transparency and authenticity is so key when it comes to your life. And if you're lying to people and lying to yourself, you're never going to be able to get the help that you need. So really sit and reflect of, what does a happy, successful, joyful, peaceful, whatever you're looking to have, what does that life look like for me? Whether it was on my vision board or not, whether it was what I thought about when I was a child coming up, or what I've been talking about with my friends and family as the ultimate level of success. And then from those moments on, just approach it of, okay, now that I've established what I really want, and not that was a lie you told yourself. It could have been a lie you told yourself, or it could have just been something that you wanted at one point that you no longer want, and that's fine. How do I get to those places of getting there? And do I have some blocks that are stopping me from getting there mentally? Because it also may be, you may say, well, I just don't know how to get there. So it might be confusion. There might be anxiety or fear because you have things out on your plate and you say, I'm afraid to make this pivot. I don't know how it's going to affect my life.
Mm.
It just may be something like, a trauma block from before where maybe you tried something in the past, it didn't work out, it had a horrible result, and now you don't want to go down those paths again. So really identifying what's stopping you from going to that next level and working on that. And that's why I'm such a huge proponent of therapy if you're dealing with something that you feel you can't handle on your own. Because I think there are times where you'll realize I'm doing everything I can, or everything I think I'm supposed to be doing, and it's still not working. And, so we talked about it, medication might be the end goal for some of those places, but you can't even get the medication if you don't talk to the person to determine the first steps of what's going on. So talk to someone first, find a therapist, even if you can't, know how to find therapists, your insurance doesn't cover it. If you're in church, try to see if there's some church counselors that could lead you in the right way or talk to you. But there's a lot of help. I don't know this number to be the number to get help, but 311 in New York City basically is a number for everything to go and find out what you need help with, whatever in your life. So call 311 and just say, maybe I'm having some issues. I like to speak to some mental health professionals, see if there's something free or affordable or just resources. Can you let me know? And then do that, because I believe it's all in the phases of acknowledgement, trying to work on it yourself, and then when you can't, finding the help, staying authentic to yourself, and then remembering throughout this process as you're working on your business and your career, because I go through this constantly, recognizing that just different things may be right or wrong for different stages of your life. So me, even for example, at this point where I have my business, I've had it for 12 years, it's not as stable as it once was, and the clients are not coming in the same way. So now I'm looking for a job, part-time, full-time, something to supplement, to balance. And for a long time, I struggled with accepting that, because I felt like I did not hit the point with my business where I wanted to end it. Like I wanted to be Jordan the first time when he retired, ending on top and leaving the NBA. And I'm not leaving that way. And I had this talk with a friend who had to remind me, like, well, who is that for? Is that for you to feel good, or is that what you need, pretty much? And having that talk with her helped me recalibrate it in my mind, like, you know what, that's just something inside that I had that I was struggling with, but that's not for the best for my life. So I had to get to a place between talking to my therapist, praying on it, and looking at my life and saying, you know what, do I want to leave this earth feeling like, oh, my business hit this pinnacle and I did all this great stuff with my business? Or is it more important that I have this life that when I leave, my daughter said, because of these things that you're able to provide, you and daddy, I had this type of life, and I'm able to have these experiences, things that, it took money to have, or time, or certain things that my business was not able to bring. And so within that, it's kind of going through those different phases. So I think never holding it too closely to your chest. If you don't achieve what you thought you were going to achieve, to say, you know what, I'm a failure. No, you're not a failure. You went through a phase. That was it. You may get back to doing that same thing again, but just knowing that there's going to be different periods in your life, and you should just proceed with them all. And I don't want to say grace per se, but proceed with it with an open heart and an open mind, and just open to what's coming, because your peace may come from a place you never recognized when you let go of things you think you should have had.
Ooh.
As it's 11:11 here. 1:11 here.
Yeah. I'm marking that as well. That was good.
I'm
all right. Rapid fire questions. Melissa, you already gave us a book, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So rapid fire, we're going through them quickly. One book that has significantly influenced your mental wellness journey. Feel free to give us a different one.
Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hersey.
Morning person or night owl?
Night owl.
What's a mantra or quote you live by?
Don't let great be the enemy of good enough.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Tea, of course. Specifically, cinnamon tea by Hardy and Sons. Yeah.
Describe your ideal day off in 3 words.
Taking a nap.
I like that.
3 words.
Yeah, it's true. Like I just checked it. I was like, okay, that's 3 words. Nicole, rapid fire questions. Favorite hobby to de-stress?
I would have to say, I'm sorry, it's two. It's either reading or watching reality shows or business shows.
Okay. The
Hmm.
best advice you've received about balancing work and family?
Everything is a phase, so don't get caught up. Just ride the different phases.
Your top productivity hack?
Ooh, scheduling. Scheduling, if you
Mhm.
schedule your life, you can't schedule everything, but if you put things in schedules, it'll just seem so much more manageable. I love my Google Calendar.
Amen. What's your favorite family activity?
Hmm. You know what? Just being together with like good food and warm outside weather, preferably by a beach.
Nice. And what's your favorite healthy snack?
My favorite healthy snack. I don't know why that's the one that's getting me now. Uh, my favorite healthy snack, I don't know, and I eat a lot of them too. Dang, I'm getting caught on this one. I'm gonna say, Jess, I love water and I love anything chocolate. So if I can get in dark chocolate, that'll
Hmm.
qualify to me as a healthy snack.
Yes, it does quite. It's a
Oh,
good
you
thing
know
you
what?
put in
There,
dark.
there is actually a favorite. It's not always healthy, but it's La Dolce's chocolate. They have like 3 stores in the U.S. It's a Swiss chocolate
Mhm.
company. I eat that. They have a chocolate almonds. I can eat that all day long.
Hmm. Okay. All right. I have never had that, but I'll look out for it. All right. This was such a good, nourishing conversation.
Great.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with me, taking time out of your busy schedules. I know we went over time, but sometimes we just can't force a ending. We have to just let things naturally
Yeah.
progress. So I really appreciate that you all had the time, the extra time to spare. And I will link all of your socials below in the description. But of course, you still have an opportunity before we wrap up to just mention like how the listeners can connect with you. Is there anything you have going on that you want to like shamelessly plug at this point in time? Now is the time to do so.
Oh, well, I'm not ready to plug my plugs, but you can definitely follow me. My business Instagram or business socials across all the platforms is Normal Solutions. It's Normel. Play on Melissa, see how that works.
Yeah.
So Normal Solutions is where I talk about tech. But just to connect with me as a person, MJ in color. So MJENCOLOUR.
Okay, and for me, you can follow my different social platforms at Same Day Marketing. So Instagram at Same Day Marketing. But I would say honestly, the most direct way to get to me is through LinkedIn. I love making connections on LinkedIn. So if you're on there, just search for Nicole McGarrell. Look for the Black Nicole McGarrell, founder of Sunny Day Marketing, and just send me a connection request and let me know that you heard about me on Tea Time so that we can connect because I love having conversations. And I don't have anything else to plug either, but I do want to just say thank you for hosting this because this, in a weird way, it almost felt like another type of good mental health exercise. Like I feel lighter having this conversation, and I feel like this has just been so healing, for lack of cliche words. But this has been a good conversation. So thank you to you because this is a
Oh,
oh, see,
Thank
look, we got that affirmation in the background. So thank you for that.
See how it's all lining up? It's
yeah.
all the signals. But yes, thank you so
I'm
much.
so glad to hear that you really enjoyed it as well, because that's why I use the word nourishing, because I felt myself like, oh, this is kind of like a little group therapy session. And
Yes.
yeah, y'all was speaking to me. So I know the listeners are going to enjoy this episode.